Okay, good evening everybody and welcome along to the exercise, protein and weight loss seminar this evening. We're going to be covering a lot of very high interest topics this evening. One of them of course being exercise on a vegetarian diet, another one being protein on a vegetarian diet or a vegetarian based diet. How do you get your protein? And many of you will have heard this question if we've been vegetarians or vegans over a period of time. Also plant protein versus animal protein. So how do we get plant protein and what foods do we get in them? We'll cover that off. And also sustainable weight loss. So there's a high interest level in that, obviously with the obesity, diabetes, overweight problems that we have around the world. So we'll cover that as well. But first, let's bust some myths, because there's so much myth around, and particularly in New Zealand and Australia, this part of the world where we're based on farming, so much myth around needing to eat high levels of animal products to get our protein. It's actually not the case. The fact that an opinion has been widely held is no evidence whatsoever that it is not utterly absurd. Indeed, in view of the silliness of the majority of mankind, a widespread belief is more likely to be foolish than sensible. It's a great quote from Bertrand Russell. And what he's trying to say there is basically just because everyone thinks something doesn't actually mean A, that it's smart, or B, that it's the right thing to do, or C, that it's healthy. Disease often has to do with producing the right amount of protein at the right place at the right time. Changing the amount of a protein will also create disease. Now that is from a molecular geneticist at Johns Hopkins Medicine. So when you really start to look at what is the cutting edge science here, we know that proteins have a huge impact as to whether you get unwell or whether you stay healthy. So sickness and disease very much tied in with protein. So high protein meat eating myth number one is you must eat lots of meat or you will not get enough protein. You will get sick and tired and not be able to function well. The actual truth is the countries with the worst disease rates, heart disease, cancer, diseases that are really killing us, diabetes, obesity, are New Zealand, Australia, America and the UK. And these are the countries also that get about 70% of their protein from animal foods. So the higher the level of animal foods is definitely correlated with these disease rates. In rural China, rural Japan, rural Africa, other areas, they get about 5 to 10% of their protein intake from animal foods. So most of their protein, of course, they get from plants. So an exercise myth. What's an exercise myth? You will never be able to function well or compete at sports unless you eat lots of meat. You probably would have heard this one as well. Again, completely untrue. The actual truth is many of the world's top athletes are vegetarian. They cover all kinds of sports from baseball to basketball to softball to rugby to soccer, weightlifting, sprinting, long distance running, walking, powerlifting, all kinds of different areas around the world. We have world champions all over the place. They break world records and they are world champions just through eating plants. So let's have a look at some of them. World champion wrestler Chris Campbell is a vegetarian. Olympic multiple gold medal winner Murray Rose is also a vegetarian. Tennis greats Martina Navratilova and Chris Everett are both vegetarians. 68-year-old marathoner Ruth Heydrich is a vegetarian. World champion diver Johnny Westmiller is a vegetarian. Now he was quite famous for playing Tarzan, of course, in a lot of the old Tarzan movies over the years. He used to dive off the bridges, and I remember watching it as a kid, being really impressed with how great it was. And he was all doing that before there was any special effects. Bill Pickering, who swam the English Channel faster than anyone in history, is a vegetarian. And the only athlete to win Ironman triathlon more than twice is vegetarian David Scott, and he's won it 6 times. So can you have world champion vegetarians who are actually just eating plants? Yes, you can. We've even got people who break world records. The world champion cyclist Adam Meyerson is one. World champion track and field athlete Edward Moses is another one. We've got people like the late bodybuilder and fitness expert Jack LaLanne. Incredibly strong, 80-year-old vegetarian Peter Ragnar, one of the strongest people on the planet in his 80s, able to bend horseshoes with his bare hands. Dr. Arola, PhD, has shown 10 studies where meat-eating athletes, non-athletes who are vegetarian, outperformed meat-eating athletes in different studies over the course of the last 100 years. So it's rife around the world. Even vegan world champions, people are not even eating dairy products. We have them. And even in those very, very hard sports like The Ultimate Fighter, martial arts, Matt Danzig is a vegan since 2007, and he's currently in his best shape ever in 2011 as a vegan. He's beaten all comers in one of the ultimate fighting sports in the world. Boxing champions in 1996, there was a vegan boxer called Keith Holmes. He took the WBC middleweight title from Quincy Taylor, who once knocked out Sugar Ray Leonard. Plant-based bodybuilders, and this is where you get the eye candy for the women who are watching today, where you get people like Robert Cheek, Christopher Flannery, or Bill Pearl, creating incredible physiques just through eating plants. Bill Pearl, indeed, is a 4-time Mr. Universe winner, one of the biggest bodybuilders in history. I've now been vegetarian for almost 20 years. We have no fish, fowl, or red meat in our diet, yet I can still carry the same amount of muscle as I did in winning my 4 Mr. Universe titles. A direct quote from him. So I'm often asked what the secret serving equation should be of protein for optimal athletic performance. And my answer to this is simple. The concern should not be about quantity, but rather quality. Conventional sports training and nutrition books advise taking 1 gram of protein for every pound of body weight, which for me would be about double the quantity I take now. High quality, multi-source protein that is alkaline forming and easy to digest will help you reach your peak performance. The question of serving depends on the individual. Now, who said that? Brendan Brazier, vegan, Ironman triathlete, 2-time Canadian 50K ultra marathon champion and best-selling author of The Thrive Diet. A worldwide inspiration this man is. Breaking world records, one of the fittest people in the world, eats nothing but plants. So one of the world's strongest men, Patrick Bauerlein, took the crown at Germany's 2011 Strongest Man competition. He holds the world record log lift since 2009. And in 2010, he set a new German heavyweight log lifting record of 397 pounds. Now that is an extraordinarily hard thing to do. This guy is completely and utterly packed with muscle, as you can see from the picture. And he says being vegetarian makes you a better athlete. So this man eats plants. Danny David, again, if you want to look at muscle definition in someone, this is someone who adorns the cover of fitness magazines, really cut and buffed and amazing looking in terms of his physique. Raw vegan. What does he do to get his massive muscle definition? He eats things like barley grass, parsley, alfalfa, spinach, sprouts, quinoa, lentils, avocado, kale. Amazing mixture of foods, and that's what he gets it from. Meat has no place in a professional athlete's diet. Since I stopped eating meat, I'm faster and I have more energy. That's from top British squash player and vegetarian James Willstrop. Now we know that squash is one of those energy endurance sports that really takes a lot of work to maintain, and he does that on plants. None of this is weird. If you go back 300 or 400 years, meat was reserved for special occasions. Remember, almost every long-distance runner turns into a vegan when they're running anyway. You can't digest fat or protein very well. That's from champion vegan ultramarathoner Scott Jurek in 2010. Now, what about walking? I'm someone who walks. I love to walk. As many of you know, I walk a lot. I've been walking for well over a decade. And I now find that because I'm so fit with my walking, I can drop and run for a long period of time without any issue at all, because I'm so fit with my walking. And when I walk, I carry weights because I'm so fit with my walking. I walk up hills now and I strap weights onto my body. But this guy is a whole nother level. Vegan Michael Greismeyer set the Guinness World Record just recently in stair running while carrying a 30-kilo backpack in September 2011. For over 6 hours, he carried the heavy weight and went up and down 20,000 stairs. You can actually go online and punch it in and have a look if you want to see him doing it. Incredible feat. Another one here, one of the most famous athletes in history, Olympian and 9 gold medal winner, Carl Lewis. I've found that a person does not need protein from meat to be a successful athlete. My best performances were when I was 30 years old and I was a vegan, from one of the most celebrated athletes in history. So vegan Ironman and cycling. So if you're into cycling or that kind of thing, there's a lot of that kind of athletic performance happening on a plant-based diet. Vegan ultramarathoner Scott Jurek broke the American record running 165 miles in the 24-hour run world championship last year in France. And Brendan Brazier says also, all the top-level athletes I know at this point eat a primarily plant-based diet. Vegans Jason Lester and ultramarathon man Richard Roll competed 5 Ironman distance triathlons. They swam, rode and ran their way through 560 miles of cycling and 12 miles of swimming and 131 miles of running. And they did all that in just 7 days, and it was consecutive. So imagine needing the amount of energy to do that over 7 days, all that swimming, running and cycling. In 7 days, they did it all on plants. So let's get into some of those myths. Protein myth number 1. You need to eat animal foods to get your protein. 100% incorrect. All plant foods contain and supply protein, except for some fruits and, of course, fats. Even oranges, as an example, contain around 11 amino acids. Quinoa is the best quality protein food there is, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. But plant protein, one of the great things about plant protein is it's a slow and steady synthesis of new proteins created by the body as required. So plant proteins come in a singular rates with amino acids and proteins. Protein myth number 2. You cannot get enough protein as a vegetarian. Again, this is 100% incorrect. It would actually be very difficult to not get enough protein when you're on a vegetarian diet. Good quality, complete protein is easily supplied, even on a totally vegetarian or vegan diet. Virtually every legume, every whole grain, every nut and every seed, and most vegetables contain at least 10% protein in an easily assimilable way. So it's actually quite easy to do. Most people can meet all their protein requirements by eating a healthy and varied assortment of plant foods throughout the day. For example, for breakfast, myself, I soak my muesli overnight. You'll know my muesli recipe. I soak it, I get my nuts and seeds, and I get my raw soaked jumbo whole oats in there in my morning muesli. For lunch and dinner, I get my pure protein from vegetables, obviously, maybe avocado in there. You get a good whack of 10 grams of protein in every single avocado you eat. And legumes as well. I might have some lentils or chickpeas or hummus or tofu with our lunch. And then for snacks, if I'm making an afternoon smoothie out of green kale, which of course is an extraordinary protein-rich superfood, I get that in my smoothie. So, a lot of these things are myths. There's another great myth, which is you have to eat complete proteins. Now, that's also 100% incorrect. And I remember, having been in the industry now for 25 years, for years people believed that if you didn't eat complete proteins, you would get sick and die. It was amazing how many people thought that. And of course, it's completely incorrect. Amino acids continually move around the human body. Proteins remain available for combining for up to 2 days. So you can eat one meal in the morning of some muesli and you get a whole lot of amino acids flooding around the body on Monday morning. And on Tuesday afternoon, you have another meal, maybe of some lentils or something. The body will combine those to make complete proteins, still within that 48-hour period. If the cells in one area of the body are low in amino acids, the body will move the amino acids via the blood. And we see this also in the fasting studies of people who are running long distances just on water fasting, and the protein levels remain the same in the blood because the body will recycle and move them around. There's much natural recycling of proteins that goes on in the human body. So what actually is protein? As we've been talking about it, what actually is it? Well, it's the basic material in all living cells. So it's very important. Protein, carbohydrates, and fats are our 3 macronutrients that we need. And then you've got your micronutrients like vitamins and minerals and things like that, which we'll talk about in another seminar. Proteins are made from amino acids. And there are 8 essential amino acids which our body cannot make. And there are 11 non-essential amino acids that our body can make as long as we're getting enough of the other 8. So making sure you're getting those 8 key ones regularly in your diet every day is what's important. So the 8 essential amino acids are isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. And the 11 non-essential amino acids, which the body can make if it's got those others, are alanine, arginine, asparagine, aspartic acid, cysteine, glutamic acid, glutamine, glycine, histidine, proline, and tyrosine. So a nice mixture of things there which you don't need to particularly remember, but if you wanted to know what they are, there they are. So what is the difference between animal proteins and plant proteins? Well, with animal proteins, they do different things in the human body. We know that they're acidic and they leave an acidic residue. We will cover this again in more detail in the acid and alkaline seminar. They have 0 fiber. We know how important fiber is for moving the bowel through. The countries with the lowest levels of fiber directly always have the highest level of cholesterol and heart disease all over the world. America, for instance, the lowest level of fiber in the Western world, highest levels of heart disease. Japan, the highest level of fiber and the lowest heart disease rate. So we know there's a direct relationship with how fiber works in the bowel and protects us from heart disease and cancer of the bowel. Animal proteins also are combined, so the body has to break them down. They're cooked generally because we don't usually go around eating our animal products raw. They're denatured. They've got 0 vitamin C, which of course is such a crucial longevity nutrient. No antioxidants at all. They're about 25% saturated fat. They don't contain any prebiotics, and they generally are highly processed. And we know that highly processed animal products are the worst kind of foods that you eat, along with highly refined sugar-rich products as well, and fried foods. So vegetable proteins are quite different. They're alkalining on the body. They leave an alkaline residue. They're very high fiber as opposed to low fiber. They separate. so the body can use them and build its own amino acid profiles, because of course we're built out of different amino acids mixtures creating proteins in the human body. Also, they're raw. You can eat a lot of your vegetable foods raw. You can cook them, of course, as well. Preserved, so they're protected inside their vegetable state. And of course, vitamins and minerals are much higher in your vegetable food. So you get a high vitamin C content, rich in antioxidants, zero saturated fat, of course, apart from a little bit in coconut, and high prebiotics and minimal processing. So it's quite a different mixture when you really start to look at what's going on with vegetable proteins versus your animal proteins. They're almost opposite in how they work in the human body. So the majority of what you need to eat with your proteins is plant-based. How do proteins work in the body? Well, animal proteins, as we know, corrode the organs. We know that they feed bowel cancer, the biggest single link to bowel cancer, according to World Cancer Research Fund and World Health Organization, is, of course, animal foods and a lack of fiber. They raise blood cholesterol. We know that. We know that they raise blood pressure and liver cancer rates as well. Breast cancer rates go up the more animal foods you eat, and you get more bone loss with the more meat that you eat. Also, kidney damage is raised, and you get an increased range of IGF-1, which is a carcinogen. So vegetable proteins have, of course, the opposite effect. They protect the organs, they prevent bowel cancer, particularly with the fiber and the prebiotics. They also lower your blood cholesterol, makes a big difference, and lower your blood pressure. And of course, blood pressure being the biggest precursor to heart disease in the world, which is killing 40% of humans. Very important to keep the blood pressure at a healthy level. Liver cancer rates as well, bring them down, lowers breast cancer rates. The higher the vegetarian levels in society, the lower the levels of breast cancer. Also bone loss, protects you against bone loss. So protects the kidneys as well, and we'll go into that in a minute, and decreases IGF-1. So essentially, again, if you look at how animal proteins work with vegetable proteins, there's a different connection in the human body, with one raising that level of disease and one lowering the level of disease. So protein and iron sources, people ask a lot about this, and it's very easy to get your protein and your iron sources from your vegetables. And I've just got a few coming up on the screen now, which I'm covering off with protein and iron. Protein being chlorophyll, quinoa and buckwheat, flaxseed, tofu and things like that, spirulina and chlorella. And iron, you'll notice tofu, lentils, green leafy vegetables, very similar between the two groups. So you get a lot of crossover with foods that are rich in the vegetable kingdom in protein and rich in calcium and iron as well. So a nice combination. Dried fruits like figs, you get in 5 dried figs, you'll get 300 milligrams of calcium. So a nice whack of calcium in a very small amount of vegetable sources. So what are the healthiest protein foods in the world? Well, I've kind of put them up here in order as to how you want to eat them and how you want to enjoy them. And we start off with sprouted quinoa and sprouted buckwheat. We go into hemp seed as well, which is a lot harder to get hold of, but is a great combination. Then you've got flaxseed or linseed, which is one of those base ingredients in our muesli recipe. Broccoli as well, and spinach, 2 of those all-time great superfoods. One of the reasons Popeye was so strong was the spinach. Broccoli, incredibly good for anti-cancer. Tofu and miso as well. Spirulina, chlorella, both complete protein foods. Barley grass and wheatgrass, wonderful sources of nutrition and protein. Oats as well, and great when you soak them overnight. You get a bigger uptake of the goodness in the oats and higher protein content. Peas, almonds, pumpkin seeds. And of course, if you're wanting to eat animal products, genuine free-range grass-fed chicken eggs and oily fish. Fresh oily fish are the 2 best groups of animal sources for proteins, because of course they have good omega, they have very good essential fatty acid levels on them. So they're the good animal products, making up a total of about 5% of your diet if you're wanting to eat animal products. And having that with free range, genuine grass-fed chicken eggs or oily fish, preferably freshly caught, is the way to go if you're wanting to eat animal products. Brown rice, beans and legumes as well, peanuts, cashews, tahini, pecans, Brazil nuts, sunflower, sesame. So there's a really wide range of foods that are a good source of protein in a vegetarian diet. So if you aim to eat about a half to 1 cup of protein-rich foods per meal, then you'll find getting your 40 to 70 grams of protein a day rather easy. So it's actually not that much of a challenge to have half to 1 cup of a protein-rich meal. It's about the size, half the size of your fist or so, and very easy to get it in. And as a comparison and an example, 52% or about half the calories in steak come from protein, but you only get 7 grams of protein per 100 calories cooked. So you cook up your steak, you get about 7 grams of protein per 100 calories. High in saturated fats, but 0 antioxidants and 0 fiber. Whereas if you look at something like spinach, again, about half the amount of calories are protein, but you get 12 grams of protein per calories eaten raw. So if you throw it in your smoothie, in your afternoon smoothie or morning smoothie, blend up that spinach, you're getting double the amount of protein than you would from the same amount of steak. And spinach, of course, is one of the densest, healthiest superfoods in the world, containing antioxidants and minerals and vitamins, iron, zinc, calcium, magnesium, essential fatty acids, and is very high fiber and with zero saturated fat. So spinach, as a comparison, is an absolute solid gold superfood. So how much protein in which foods? What are the foods that contain high levels of protein? Well, for instance, yellow peas, about 40 grams. 1 cup of tofu, again, 40 grams. And what I've done in this particular slide is I've given you all the foods broken down into 1 cup of each. And this is in the levels that we generally eat them in. So, of course, some of them are cooked and some of them are dry. But mainly they're in the ways that you're used to eating them. So, yellow peas, tofu, very high levels. Pumpkin, peanuts, almonds, about 30 grams per cup. Brazil nuts, cashews, lentils, of course. You're having a cup of lentils and then alongside your muesli and things, you're getting a good whack every day. Quinoa at about 10 grams, and I recommend sprouting quinoa because the protein content goes through the roof and it's buffered with lots of living digestive enzymes as well. Rice and oats and different things as well. So even peanut butter contains a good whack. So high animal protein diets, which has been a trend for a long time, the Atkins and different things like that, are essentially, in my opinion, die young diets. Why is that? Because the more meat you eat, the more weight you gain. And it's a complete myth about meat and weight loss. High protein meat-based diets create higher mortality rates. And the high animal protein diet guarantees constipation. Guarantees it because, of course, the more meat you eat, the less fiber you've got in your diet, and dramatically raises your risk of hair loss, kidney stones, bad breath, headaches, and skin problems. So, you know, taking meat for what it is, a smaller amount with a lot more vegetables is the way to take it in. High protein diets lead to cellular damage. As one doctor so poetically put it, which is one of my favorite quotes, high protein, high fat diets are make yourself sick diets. And the more protein you eat, and a lot of people don't realize this, but the more protein you eat, the more B vitamins you need, as B vitamins are necessary to absorb the amino acids. So you must eat a food which is high in B vitamins if you're wanting to absorb and break down the protein in the human body. How do you do that? You get your protein from vegetable sources because, of course, the best, richest source of B vitamins is leafy green vegetables. So it's a very, very simple process. If you replace healthy plant carbohydrates with animal protein and fat, which most of us have been doing in the West now for the last 20 or 30 years, you are far more likely to die of almost all causes, including heart disease and cancer, which is currently killing between 65 and 70% of New Zealand and Australians and people in the UK and America for that matter as well. So high animal protein diets are kill your kidneys diets, and of course the blood, which is what you live in and what cleans the body and moves everything around in the human body, is the most important liquid in the human body. It keeps you alive. It's what we swim in, it's what we live in, and the blood is so important, and the kidneys, of course, are in charge of your blood health. People eating a high protein animal based diet have much higher risk and rates of kidney stones. And they're very painful things too, by the way. If you've had them, you'll know what I mean. If you haven't had them, you don't want to get them. And we know at least 31% of middle-aged people in the West have already got a loss of kidney function. So they're heading down that road. And kidney stones are basically created by overconsumption of animal protein and animal meat, giving a side effect of excessive calcium and oxalate in the kidneys. Vegetarian diets dramatically improve the health conditions of my kidney patients. That from kidney specialist Yoon Sung Chul, Professor of Nephrology at Dankook University Medical College. So this is a specialist, a professor, who specializes in that area of the body, of the kidneys. And his biggest influence that he can have on the health of his own patients is putting them on a vegetarian diet. It makes more of a difference than almost anything else when it comes to your kidney health. According to Professor W.G. Robertson, one of the world's foremost experts on kidney stones, animal protein intake is the biggest and most influential precursor to you getting kidney stones. I'll say that again. One of the world's foremost experts on kidney stones states that animal protein intake is the biggest and most influential precursor to kidney stones. Women who have mild kidney damage can protect or they can reverse that by eating plants and eating more plants. Over 30 years of studies have confirmed it. Basically, it's very simple. The higher your intake of animal protein, the higher the incidence of kidney stones. So if you're wanting to avoid kidney stones, eat more leafy greens, eat more vegetables, eat more plant-based foods. High animal proteins also lead to hypertension, which we know is the biggest precursor of heart disease death in New Zealand, Australia, the UK, and America. 30% of meat eaters have hypertension. So 30% have hypertension. 1% of vegetarians have hypertension. So it's a massive and enormous difference in risk and in rate of hypertension. And of course, hypertension, biggest precursor of heart disease and death. So if you're wanting to lower that, get yourself onto more of a vegetarian-based diet. The more animal protein you eat, the higher your blood pressure, which is hypertension. The more plant protein you eat, the lower your blood pressure, the happier your kidneys. And your kidneys and your blood are working together so well. High animal protein diets give you calcium loss as well. The more animal protein you eat, the more calcium is urinated away. We know that. Your doctor will tell you that and confirm that with any kind of urine test. Meat is high protein, high phosphorus, and highly acidic. 3 things that remove calcium from the human body. When the body has too much protein, phosphorus and acid all at the same time, it sucks calcium from the bones, making calcium-rich but acid foods completely useless in terms of your bone health. So if you're wanting to have good, strong bone health, make sure you have a high level of vegetables. Meat has no fiber, and when the body is constipated, of course, it absorbs less calcium. So again, another reason for bone health is that lack of calcium absorption happening in the gut from a low-fiber diet. And low-fiber diets are usually based around high animal protein sources of foods. So get your protein from your high-fiber foods, and your calcium uptake goes through the roof. High animal protein diets are deadly. In the 1970s, there was a famous, very trendy high-protein shake diet where a lot of women had these high-protein shakes. 60 women died doing this, almost 60 women, before it was banned. So, be really careful with that. The trend away from eating a lot of plants and getting your essential carbohydrates and your good quality proteins from plant foods into a high-protein, high-fat animal type diet is a really slippery slope and a very dangerous one. Not one that I recommend at all. A high-protein diet gives you a high risk of stomach, bowel, kidney, liver, cancer, heart disease, arthritis, osteoporosis, heart problems, kidney damage, and sudden death. So do I recommend it? No, I don't. So the key thing here to remember is not to be suckered by protein, iron, or calcium content alone. This is where we go wrong, and Michael Pollan famously called it nutrientism. And it's such a great term because we get suckered by thinking that, oh, we need to find B12, or we need to find calcium, or we need to find protein, or we need to find vitamin C, or we need to find beta-carotene or something. We get caught up in trying to make food more scientific than it actually is. And it's getting that basic balance of good nutrition into us that's so important. So don't get suckered by getting concerned about just protein, just iron or calcium. Instead, start to look at the food from a holistic and an overall perspective. A really good nutritional context. Ask yourself before you eat something, will this food protect me from disease? Will this food give me a long, healthy life without drugs or disease? Is that what I'm going to get from this food? How good is this food to my body? Is this food going to treat me well? Is it going to feed me? Is it going to lower my disease risk? Is it going to help me get rid of my waste? Is it going to make me more alkaline and fit and healthy? A lamb chop is a good example. Gives you 12% hard to absorb protein, is extremely constipating, and 75% saturated fat. And then you swap that with something like tempeh, which is a fermented, pre-digested, high fiber, high prebiotic, high probiotic, easy to absorb 50% protein, the same amount, but with phytoplant nutrients, essential fatty acids, and 0 saturated fat. So how can you compare something that will constipate you, raise your disease risk in heart disease and cancer, give you 12% protein and 75% saturated fat, with something that is easy to absorb, high fiber, plant protein, and gives you 50% protein? So there's no comparison at all when you look at it. What is the best source of protein? Chlorophyll. The number one source of protein on the planet is chlorophyll. What actually is chlorophyll? It's stored sunlight. And it sounds really weird, you know what? We run on sunlight? Well, we actually do. Sunlight beats down on the plants convert and store that energy through a process called photosynthesis. Of course, we then eat the plants and we reconvert that energy and the body then uses it. And it's a very simple process, but a lot of people get it wrong, thinking that somehow we need the cow to eat the grass before we can get the goodness out of the grass, which you don't. Of course, you can go straight to the grass in the first place. So chlorophyll is the richest source of protein in a food. It's protective against all disease. We know that animals of all sorts of animals in nature, even in captivity, when they get sick, what do? They immediately fast and stop eating, but what do they then do when they start eating? They eat what? Grass. They go straight to grass and they start eating grass. Why? Because partly the huge levels of chlorophyll that they flood the body with. Protective against all disease, gets you well, rich in oxygen, which is anti-cancer. We know that, of course, the higher the level of oxygen in the body, the lower the chances of cancer. A powerful antioxidant as well. It's easy to absorb energy, and it is the closest thing to human blood. When you take a look at it, it really is quite similar to human blood, apart from the magnesium and the iron at the core. So it builds blood, it helps remove bad smells and toxins, and cleans and purifies the liver. So it's very, very good overall, and chlorophyll is one of those things that, one of those reasons Grandma always said, of course, eat your green vegetables, of course, getting that chlorophyll into the human body. And chlorophyll, gram for gram, has more protein than any animal meat in the world, bar nothing. It's incredible, actually, the levels. And kale is a really good example, as I said earlier. Gram for gram, if you're really looking at a leafy green blossom vegetable that has the almost perfect balance of all the essential amino acids, 1 raw pound of kale gives you all the essential amino acids you need in a day. You get everything from histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, cysteine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, tyrosine, and valine, all in the one food, and all in the perfect amounts that we know we need for human health, all in the one thing. So very, very good source. So if you're having 3 blenderfuls of kale a day, getting a lot of kale into you, of course you'll be getting a large amount of good quality protein. So how much protein do I need? It's a question that we get asked a lot, and as I referred earlier to Brandon Brazier's quote, he actually takes about half a gram of protein per kilo body weight, as opposed to 1, which a lot of people recommend. So instead of about 70 grams of protein a day, he's taking about half the amount at 35. We need about 10% of our daily nutrient intake of protein to prevent disease. Not 15%, not 20%, and not 25%. It's about 10%. So these high protein diets that are recommending you eat lots of meat and animal fat up to 30% is absolutely not correct. Individual protein requirements do vary. So according to your age and your body type and your size and gender and your activity, of course, whether you're pregnant or not, whether you're doing lots of weights and workouts and things. So for instance, if you're a smaller person and you're doing a lot more work, like Trey, my eldest boy, for a while he was building and laying bricks. So making bricks, laying bricks, building pathways, things like that. He got incredibly well buffed and built up all his muscle. Eating plants, of course, nothing but plants, but he got very, very strong simply because he was doing it all day. So his requirement for energy intake and protein went up. Now he's about 10 kilos lighter than me, but he needed a lot more protein because of the work he was doing. So you can be quite a slim, lighter person, smaller person, requiring a larger amount of protein if you are doing that kind of exercise. And of course, people vary. Some people need more protein, some people need less. And you'll know later on, we'll get to symptoms of protein deficiency, and we'll cover that off. So an average person weighing about 70 kilos, which is about what I weigh, I'm about spot on 70 kilos, can use between 20 and 70 grams of protein daily, or up to about half a gram for every 1 kilogram of body weight. So it's about 40 grams, seems to be about perfect for most people, which is so easy to get in the diet. If you're eating too much protein, you're getting it too much in the diet, you get a decreased serotonin level and you get carbohydrate cravings. So watch for that. If you're eating too much carbohydrates in the diet, you get increased serotonin, you'll get a protein craving, that savory craving going on. So also watch out for that, have that balance go on. If you aren't getting enough protein, what are the symptoms that you'll be looking for? Is tiredness. You may feel fatigued, irritable, lethargic, depressed and unable to concentrate. So not able to keep your attention on something particularly, or suffering bad skin and hormonal imbalances. So it's quite varied, but it does give you a sense of the basic thing is the tiredness and lack of energy. So if you've got that happening mid-afternoon or mid-morning, increase the protein levels in your breakfast or your lunch, and also look at what mixture of food you're eating, because it may well be that you're eating something that you're allergic to or intolerant of, which makes you go kind of sleepy mid-afternoon. So cooking destroys between 50 and 85% or so of protein. So again, one of those things about eating more raw foods is very important. It also becomes coagulated when it's cooked. And digestive enzymes are proteins. And we've talked about digestive enzymes before, and that's in another seminar. But digestive enzymes are so important. And when you cook them, they have their structure changed, denaturing and inactivating them. So it makes quite a difference. Now, over 80% of your protein that you need every day comes from your own body recycling it, taking from the old dying cells, rebuilding new young cells with it. And again, that is exactly what happens when you fast. The body recycles those proteins from old to new, and it goes through that process. Most people generally in the West tend to eat far too much protein, hence the levels of cancer and heart disease. Too much protein will give you an overloaded pancreas. And of course, the pancreas is so important for what? creating insulin. Of course, and what does insulin protect us from? Diabetes. And what is the biggest epidemic in the world at the moment, currently running at between 370 and 400 million people? Diabetes. Your pancreas produces proteolytic enzymes to break down protein. So you must look after your pancreas if you're wanting to break down your protein levels. A high intake of animal protein, or things like processed saturated fats, sugar, alcohol, drugs, coffee, fried foods, tobacco, smoking, of course, these can all exhaust your pancreas. And of course, it's so important to keep your pancreas healthy if you're wanting to protect yourself from diabetes. And this leads to undigested protein molecules being absorbed, and this creates inflammation. So you get that over-acidic inflammation starting happening with redness and hardening of the arteries and things like that. And then your overworked pancreas, when it gets in that condition, cannot produce the anti-inflammatory enzymes to actually fix the problem. So you create the problem with the meat and too much animal products, and then the very thing in the human body that can fix it also gets wrecked. So program yourself, champ, or society will program you. And that's from Harley Johnson, the 2008 South Australian 24-hour solo cross-country champion. He is a raw vegan, nothing but plants, mostly leafy greens. And he won. He took the race out. Remember the golden rule, energy gives you energy. So if you're feeling tired, best thing you can do is to get out there and get up and get going. Regular exercise is the best cure for tiredness, bar none. The next time you feel drowsy, try stepping outside into the sunshine for a 5-minute walk. It's a very, very simple piece of advice, but it really does tend to work every time. There's something magical about walking, sunshine, and fresh air that recharges the human body in a way that we haven't managed to synthesize into a pill. Not that we ever will. Exercising in the morning on an empty stomach is the best time for burning fat. A lot of people ask me, when is the best time to exercise? There's no question, it's in the morning. First thing in the morning, the body prefers to burn fat. Get out there and exercise if you can. Women can slash their risk of stroke up to 68% just by getting out there through regular walking. And walking is so underestimated, the power that it has. I'm a huge fan. It's my main source of exercise. It's wonderful. Absolute super way to exercise. High intensity or moderate are both fine. Sometimes, do a bit of a sprint, other times do a jog and a run. Sometimes really push your muscles as fast as you can. Other times ease back. So it's a mixture of fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers going on. So a mixture of both. Doing the occasional sprint or skipping for 10 minutes at full steam is very, very good for you, good for the heart. And your quality of life and longevity depends often on your muscle strength. So keeping your muscles well done with push-ups and body weights and things, very, very good. And correctly done push-ups are still the best abdominal workout of all. If you're wanting to get yourself in a really good slim shape and get some good definition of your abdominals, do push-ups every day. They're still the best abdominal workout. Staying active also reduces hunger. You'll notice that when you're fasting, that when you stay active, the hunger goes down, and it's one of those things that fasting tends to trigger in the brain as well. And also as you get older, you need to exercise more rather than less, and it increases longevity. So if you're wanting to live a long, healthy life, you need to increase your exercise levels when you get older, not decrease them. Also, regular exercise lowers your level of bad cholesterol and increases dramatically your level of HDL, which is your good cholesterol. That balance is so important for heart health and artery health. Also lowers your blood glucose levels, so very good for sugar management and diabetes. It also normalizes your insulin levels, so very good for anyone wanting to protect themselves from getting overweight or obese or ending up as a diabetic. Prevents fatty liver disease, and we know that 95% of deaths with organ cancers are generally liver failure. People die of liver failure because they cannot process the cancer. So protecting your liver is important, and exercise does that. Prevents depression and migraines, so get out there. The lower the levels of exercise, the higher the levels of depression and headaches around the world. And the chromosomes of people who exercise more and eat better do not degrade as quickly. So if you're out there exercising, you're just generally looking after yourself and getting more exercise, you'll find your chromosomes and your telomeres, which are the end of the chromosomes, do not degrade as quickly. Sitting too much will kill you. And this is a really interesting one because so many of us sit for most of the time as we work. Prolonged sitting significantly increases your cancer risk. It also significantly doubles your bowel cancer risk and triples your risk of deep vein thrombosis, DVT, which of course a lot of people get on long haul flights when they're sitting there but eating a lot of constipating foods, not exercising. So they don't exercise, they're eating a lot of constipating foods, and then they sit for 24 hours flying from New Zealand to England or something like that, and then they get hit with DVT. very common now because so many people in their everyday life are not exercising and they're sitting and they're eating those constipating foods and they're not exercising. So that triple mixture tends to cause DVT. So I'd highly recommend if you're at an airport, don't sit down before you fly. Actually walk around the airport. I never sit until I get on the plane. Doesn't matter how long the flight is, I'm always on my feet and I'm always standing before I get on a plane because you're going to have to sit on a plane anyway. So prolonged sitting causes the body to actually switch off its fat burning mechanisms. So the more you can avoid sitting for long periods of time, the better, because the longer you sit, unfortunately, the fatter you get. That's the simple way to put it. The more time you sit, the faster you die. There's a lot of science and studies now showing over and over again conclusively, the longer you sit, the more you're heading for a grave. If you sit for an hour, then walk for 5 minutes. It's one of those golden rules I recommend almost every time I talk. Simple little thing you can do if you're doing at work. That if you're sitting here all day, once an hour, when you notice the clock gets to a certain point, get up and have a walk and make a huge difference. Your brain switches on when you come back and sit down. You can also grab a glass of water because you're probably dehydrated anyway. So you go and get a glass of water, walk around the building, come back and sit down. Your brain is sharper and quicker. You'll notice that problems that you had tend to solve themselves a lot quicker. So the only difference between life and death is movement. So move, get out there and move, and particularly if you can walk. It's a great way to do it. Walking daily will save your life, will extend your life. The historian George Trevelyan wrote in 1913 that he had 2 doctors, my right leg and my left leg. And it's a wonderful little quote because they really are the doctors. If you can keep those legs going, you'll dramatically lower your risk of stroke, arthritis, osteoporosis, cancers, heart disease, depression, stress, asthma, dementia, diabetes, obesity, and is the best indicator, exercise-wise, of longevity. When you study centenarians, as I have, you'll notice that all of them walk. Walking is more effective than even weights when it comes to diabetes and metabolic syndrome and protecting from that. Walking daily preserves your memory, and the life expectancy of a fit 80-year-old is about the same as an unfit 60-year-old. So, it does make a huge difference. Walking just 3 hours a week for 12 weeks causes so many new neurons in the brain to grow that it actually increases literally your brain size. It actually be scientifically measured to increase brain size when you walk. Just 3 hours a week for 12 weeks. Walking dramatically increases your sleep as well and improves your sleep. So much better, deeper sleep if you're exercising, particularly walking. And brisk walking every day is a key sign for longevity and health in old age and keeps your brain young. So it's the healthiest choice of exercise for the healthiest older people on the planet. And consistency is the key. So just try to do it every day. Try to walk for 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour and a half every day. And as soon as you get fit enough in those areas where you can walk, then target hills, go faster, time yourself, carry weights. There's no excuse for not making walking harder for yourself. Once you get fit with it, increase your fitness. Don't go backwards or don't get into a same groove with it. Walking outside in green surroundings is simply the best exercise there is. Sunlight, greenery, walking, deep breaths. Wonderful, absolute magic. So we know that being overweight is killing us. So we'll get into weight loss in a minute. But before that, as a reminder to the kind of state of health that we're actually in, we know that we're eating about 500 calories more than we did in the 1970s. That's an enormous amount of calories. That is every day, by the way, not each week. But every day we're eating about 500 calories more. Now, New Zealand has nearly 30% obesity rates right now. This is in 2011, and it's growing. Men at the moment, I think it's about 28.7, 29% obesity rates. And this is 150% more than what we had in the 1980s. So in the 1980s, we thought we were starting to get out of control. Now, it's phenomenal. It's off the chart. New Zealand has the third fattest developed country in the world, heading for number 2. Childhood obesity is 200% higher than 1980. 200%. Over 20% of our 4-year-olds are now obese. Now, I've raised 4 kids. I know what that's like. And nearly 1 out of every 4 of our kids are obese before they even get to school. That is how out of control the overweight problem is. We have about 70% more obese 20 to 30-year-olds since 2001. And that's the biggest group that's growing. So if you're between 20 and 30, you are at the highest risk at the moment of getting obese and overweight. It's that big group. And middle-age spread, to me, doesn't exist anymore. We've now got teenage obesity. Middle-age spread is a thing from the past. In 1997, we weighed about 74, 75 kilograms. And recently I was talking and people were saying, what do you think we weigh now? Because there'd been no statistics done. And I said, I think it's about 85, I would guess. And of course it was confirmed last week. Just recently confirmed mid-2011. that we weigh 85 kilos on average now. So we've put on 10 kilos each in the last 12, 13 years, which is completely out of control. So how do you change your weight? How do you get your weight loss down? Well, the first step is a healthy bowel. It's so important, that core thing with making sure that you've got a healthy bowel. And the three dominant groups of bacteria in the bowel, of course, are Firmicutes, Bacteroidetes, and Actinobacteria. They are the three big family groups that run your bowel health, the three big families in there. And they dominate and influence everything. Now, to keep a strong immune system, you need a proper ratio between Firmicutes and Bacteroidetes. So you need to have that balance right. And we know the leaner and healthier you are, the higher your Bacteroidetes. So the more you get in shape and get healthy, the more Bacteroidetes you have, the more you influence your immune system to be even more effective. And as you lose weight, your gut literally changes. And that 100 trillion cells going on in that gut there that you've got, which is 10 times more than the rest of the human body put together, increases the health benefits in promoting Bacteroidetes, so you get more. So how do you get more Bacteroidetes? Simple. Eat more raw, sprouted and fermented foods. They are the food groups that will help you grow and increase the Bacteroidetes. Eating plants gives you weight loss. We know that most studies show vegetarians were slimmer and leaner than meat eaters. And we know that plant whole foods contain about and burn more than 23% more calories and trigger carnitine for fat burning. Carnitine is important if you're wanting to burn fat. We know that a low level of plants in the diet gives you a 131% increase or rise in risk in abdominal fat. And naringenin in grapefruit, of course, triggers genes that break down fat. One of the most effective fat burning foods in the world is grapefruit. So the liver, of course, also is your prime fat burning organ. Very, very important. And of course, to do any justice to your liver, you must increase your plant and water intake. The two things that will kill your liver is sugar and alcohol. They'll both do it. And that's why most alcoholics die of cirrhosis of the liver. Incredibly high risk of liver damage in the Western society because of sugar and alcohol. And the two ways to fix your liver, of course, is eating less and green vegetables. Lots of water and green vegetables. Green will fix your liver. So do you want real weight loss? And of course, anyone who's overweight does. How do you get it? Well, you avoid coffee for a start. Coffee is one of those foods that raises cortisol in the human body, which raises abdominal fat, which of course raises inflammation, and raised inflammation raises hypertension. What does hypertension cause? Heart disease. Biggest precursor of heart disease death. And heart disease, of course, kills more Kiwis than anything else. Avoid gluten, fat, salt and sugar rich foods, processed foods particularly, as they elevate your insulin levels, which of course increases your hunger. Then you get this constant kind of hunger you always want, promotes fat storage, increases inflammation again, gives you a fatty liver, and causes constipation. And of course, constipation again then means your liver can't process food, which means you get liver problems. So constipation and liver problems go together hand in hand. Avoid alcohol, as it literally pickles your liver. Just avoid alcohol completely, give it up for a period of time, see how you feel. Particularly if you're wanting to lose weight, only drink on the weekends or drink for special occasions, which is what alcohol throughout history has always been used for. Sleep 8 hours a night. Very important to get enough sleep if you're wanting to influence your weight loss. Unless you've got enough sleep, you will not lose the weight that you want to lose. The body burns weight and goes through processes overnight, which needs to be done. So get 8 hours sleep a night and get regular sunlight, because your pituitary gland will actually jump out and go, you know what, there's not enough sunlight, it must be winter, I therefore need to hibernate and I'm going to crave fatty foods and I'm going to be tired all the time. So that'll happen if you don't get enough sunlight. So if you're not getting out there enough and getting sunlight, the body will think that it's time for, hibernation. So as a summary for this evening's seminar, and putting it together in a way that kind of makes it easy for you to look at what are the key things that we need to do to get weight loss. One of those golden rules is, if you're going to sit for an hour, then walk for 5 minutes. As I said earlier, so if you're sitting, you must get out and walk regularly. Drink water between meals. Your liver and your bowels, very important to get enough water in your liver and your bowels. Swap meat for freshly caught oily fish or genuine free-ranging chicken eggs. Now, I don't recommend animal products, but if you are going to eat animal products, the two animal products that seem to have the best effect on the human body, that give you the most nutrition and have the best quality protein and essential fatty acid mixture, is freshly caught oily fish and genuine free-ranging chicken eggs, which are fresh. The other thing is building a wait time, exercise time, meal time and sleep time routine. So have a routine in your life where you go to bed at about the same time, you wake up at about the same time, you exercise at about the same time, and you eat at about the same time. We have this arrogance of thinking that we're above routines and rhythms, and we're not. Everything in the human body works in a rhythm, just like the rest of the planet. So get yourself into a routine with those things. It'll make a huge difference. Eat less, live long. Golden rule, of course, centenarians. If you want to live a long, healthy life, eat less. And I don't mean starve yourself. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about eating about 80%, 70 to 80% of what you normally would in the West on average. Keep alcohol for special occasions. Alcohol humps on the weight. It just adds it on, it wakes it on around your butt and your thighs and your stomach and your neck and everywhere. And it also wrecks your liver. So really, cutting back your alcohol or giving it up completely or just having it for special occasions makes a huge difference to weight loss. Eat at least one raw meal a day. Raw foods, of course, are incredibly effective at burning fat off the human body, and they burn a lot of calories and energy to get through, and they're high fiber. And they deliver good prebiotics and probiotics to the gut, of course, which grows your Bacteroidetes family species in the gut, lowers your Firmicutes, and of course the Bacteroidetes keeps you slim and healthy. So eat something fermented every day. That gives you that prebiotic hit in the gut, again keeping that healthy bacteria level good. And walk, and then walk some more. And once you've walked enough, then walk some more. Keep walking. Walk every day. Very, very important exercise. Try to do it as much as you can. And make half your lunch and dinner green, if you can. That will also have a huge impact on your weight loss if you're wanting to lose weight. Also, avoid extruded breakfast cereals, anything that goes snap, crackle, and pop, basically. Or the corn this, and the wheaty that, and the rice bubbly this. They're all rubbish. They're just a bowl of rancid starch and sugar, white sugar. That's all they are when you actually analyse it. A whole lot of poor quality ingredients that you just don't need to have anywhere near your gut health. And given that New Zealand has one of the highest bowel cancer rates on the planet, of course the less low fibre extruded foods like that we have, the better. Get out in the sunlight daily. Get out and walk. Get out and see the sunlight. See what it's like. Get out there and experience it. Sunlight has a huge impact. So in terms of the seminar now, we find that we've come to the end of the seminar, covering the protein and weight loss and exercise. So I hope you've got some value out of it. And of course, there'll be a lot of information coming through over the next few weeks on email to back up a lot of the information that I've talked about here. So that's great. So thanks.